2 American soldiers are dead, killed in their sleep. In containerized housing units at a U.S. military base in Jordan, while the air defense systems designed to protect them were firing interceptors at incoming Iranian ballistic missiles, and the interceptors were not enough. The missile got through. The strike that killed them was not the first Iranian attack on that base. It was the fourth. 4 Iranian strikes against U.S. military forces in Jordan in 5 days. And the detail buried in the New York Times reporting on those strikes, the detail that changes the strategic picture of this entire conflict in a way that has not yet been fully absorbed, is not the death count, as devastating as that is. It is what American officials told the Times about why the strikes are getting through. Iran is not just retaining substantial missile inventories, despite weeks of the most intensive American air campaign against Iranian military infrastructure in the history of this conflict. Iran is becoming increasingly effective at penetrating U.S. and allied air defenses, and the Wall Street Journal is now reporting that U.S. officials believe the increasing accuracy of Iranian strikes on American bases and infrastructure is the result of military-to-intelligence cooperation with Russia and China. Targeting data, satellite photographs, intelligence sharing designed to help Iranian missiles find the precise locations where American soldiers sleep. 2 Americans are dead in Jordan. Russia and China may have helped aim the missile that killed them. And President Trump has reportedly told decision-makers to rain hell on Iran. The gates are open. But let's back all the way up, because to understand what is happening in Jordan right now, why that specific location has become the new focal point of the Iranian military campaign against American forces, why the escalation trajectory of the last 48 hours represents something qualitatively different from the previous phases of this conflict, and why the intelligence cooperation claim from Russia and China is the most dangerous development in the entire war, you need to understand the full sequence of decisions and movements that produce the situation on the ground as it stands right now. Jordan was not always the focal point of the Iranian targeting campaign against American forces in the region. Bahrain was the primary target in the early phases of the current conflict, the home of the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters, the most symbolically significant American military command infrastructure in the Gulf, the natural first target for an adversary trying to demonstrate that it can reach American forces directly. But as the conflict has evolved and as American military planners have repositioned forces to optimize the strike campaign's coverage and logistics, Jordan has gained strategic importance as a forward-basing location. U.S. officials confirmed to the Times that Jordan's strategic importance grew significantly as American forces shifted there from Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE ahead of the current phase of conflict. That repositioning, designed to optimize the American campaign's offensive posture, inadvertently concentrated American forces at a location that the IRGC has now identified as a priority target and has been striking with increasing tempo and increasing accuracy across 5 consecutive days. 4 attacks in 5 days against the same American military presence. That pattern is not random. It is a targeting campaign, a deliberate, sustained effort to find, hit, and ultimately neutralize a specific American military installation that CENTCOM has been using as a forward operating location for the air campaign against Iran. The IRGC is not firing ballistic missiles at Jordan because Jordan has committed military forces to the anti-Iran coalition, though Jordanian airspace has been used for American operations throughout this conflict. The IRGC is firing at Jordan because the Americans are there, because Jordan has become a hub of the American strike campaign, and because 4 strikes in 5 days demonstrates the capability to find and return to a target repeatedly rather than the one-time proof of capability salvos that characterized earlier phases of Iranian retaliatory operations. The most alarming sentence in the Times reporting is not about the death toll or the physical damage. It is the sentence about increasing effectiveness at penetrating American air defenses. Read that carefully, because it describes a trend rather than a single event. Not that Iran got lucky once, not that a single missile found a gap in the intercept architecture through the statistical probability that even very high intercept rates leave open. A trend of increasing effectiveness, meaning the IRGC's targeting and employment of its remaining ballistic missile inventory is producing better results against American and allied air defense systems across multiple engagements in sequence. That is not random variation in ballistic missile performance. That is learning. And the hypothesis that U.S. officials are now investigating, that Russia and China are providing targeting information, satellite imagery, and intelligence support that is making Iranian strikes more accurate, is the explanation that fits the observable trend better than any alternative. Russia has the satellite infrastructure. Russia has the signals intelligence capability. Russia has been running its Special Flight Squadron aircraft into Iran around the clock since the current phase of this conflict opened, bringing weapons, advisors, and technical specialists under the cover of diplomatic and government aviation registrations. Russia has every strategic incentive to see the United States absorb casualties in a Middle Eastern conflict that consumes American military resources, degrades American deterrent credibility, and provides cover for Russian operations elsewhere. And China has the Beidou navigation satellite system, already confirmed by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission to have been used by Iran to conduct direct attacks across the region. China has geospatial intelligence firms with documented People's Liberation Army links that have been marketing U.S. force position data to actors in this conflict theater. China has a strategic interest in a United States military so consumed by a Gulf conflict that it cannot respond with full attention and full resource commitment to Chinese pressure in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. 2 Americans killed in Jordan by a missile that may have been aimed with Russian or Chinese intelligence support. That sentence belongs in a different category of strategic gravity than anything else that has happened in this conflict. Because if that intelligence cooperation is confirmed, and U.S. officials are now treating it as a serious enough possibility to investigate formally and to reference through credible mainstream journalism, then this conflict is no longer bilateral between the United States and Iran. It is a proxy confrontation in which Russia and China are providing the intelligence architecture that converts Iran's remaining ballistic missile inventory from an indiscriminate saturation threat into a precision targeting system aimed at American soldiers. That is an act of war by a different name, executed through a proxy, with enough technical ambiguity to maintain deniability in any formal international legal forum while producing American casualties in a live military conflict. The cram footage from northern Iraq tells a concurrent part of the story that deserves specific attention. The counter-rocket artillery and mortar system, recognizable by the distinctive red stream of its rapid-fire rotary cannon engaging targets at close range, was firing against waves of Iranian drones hitting American positions in Iraq simultaneously with the Jordan strikes. The CRAM is one of the most effective close-in defense systems in the American inventory against the drone threat specifically, because it can engage multiple individual incoming projectiles in rapid succession with a high cyclic rate weapon. The footage of CRAM firing against Iranian drone waves in Iraq shows the system doing exactly what it was designed to do. But the parallel operation of drone attacks against Iraq and ballistic missile attacks against Jordan in the same operational window reveals the IRGC's current multi-front strategy. Use drone swarms to stress American close-in defense systems in one location while using ballistic missiles to probe for penetration opportunities at another. The 2 threats require different defensive architectures, different engagement timelines, and different operational focus from the defenders. Running them simultaneously is a deliberate attempt to exceed the attention and engagement capacity of American and Allied air defense across a wider geographic front than any single system can cover simultaneously. Bahrain is under attack. Kuwait is under attack. Jordan has been struck 4 times in 5 days with 2 Americans killed. U.S. positions in Iraq are being targeted by drone swarms. The U.S. Embassy in Amman issued a security alert citing a specific and credible threat, with Jordanian authorities evacuating Aqaba's international airport and seaport. Multiple ballistic missile launches from Kermanshah province in Iran confirmed airborne. The IRGC has opened fire on additional ships in the Strait of Hormuz, even as the American naval blockade is in effect, and the air campaign has been executing nightly against Iranian coastal military infrastructure for weeks. Every front is active simultaneously. And simultaneously with all of it, the United States is striking back in a campaign that is reportedly about to become far more expansive than anything that came before it. Now go to the nuclear development that changes the entire strategic character of the conflict's latest phase. The IAEA is investigating reports of an overnight American attack on a planned nuclear plant and the Darkhovin facility in early construction. No nuclear material is believed to have been present at the target location, which removes the most acute radiological concern from the operational picture, but does not diminish the strategic significance of the targeting decision. A facility designated for nuclear-related construction that has not yet received fissile material is still a nuclear program infrastructure target. Striking it is a statement that the American campaign's objective set has expanded to encompass not just the existing operational nuclear enrichment infrastructure, Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan, Pickaxe Mountain, but the construction pipeline that would generate the next generation of Iranian nuclear capability, even after the current facilities are destroyed. You do not bomb a nuclear facility under early construction, because it represents an imminent weapons threat. You bomb it because you have decided that Iran's nuclear program will not be allowed to reconstitute itself in new facilities while the current campaign is running. That decision represents a terminal objective whose scope extends beyond anything stated in CENTCOM's official operational communications about degrading Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping. The anti-aircraft fire over Isfahan, the city that hosts what American officials have described as the location of Iran's secret highly enriched uranium site, is the other nuclear dimension that deserves sustained analytical attention. Anti-aircraft fire over Isfahan means Iranian air defense elements in that city assessed that American strike aircraft were in the vicinity of the target and decided to engage or deter. It means the IRGC's remaining air defense capability, degraded as it has been across weeks of American strikes specifically targeting radar and missile systems along the southern coastline, retains enough operational consciousness to respond with air defense fires over interior cities when American aircraft approach sensitive locations. And it means that American aircraft were close enough to Isfahan's nuclear infrastructure that the surviving local air defense felt compelled to fire. Whether that approach was a deliberate probe of the air defense environment surrounding Isfahan, gathering intelligence about what remains of the city's anti-air capability before a future strike against the enriched uranium facility itself, or component of the same operational package that struck the nuclear construction facility elsewhere in the country, is not publicly confirmed. What is confirmed is that American aircraft were near one of Iran's most sensitive nuclear locations, and Iranian air defenses responded. That juxtaposition is not coincidental. The air damage assessment from the Jordan strike that killed 2 American soldiers adds a military dimension that compounds the human tragedy with an operational impact that will affect the American campaign's near-term capacity in that theater. Multiple U.S. manned and unmanned aircraft were damaged at the Jordanian base in the same strike that killed the soldiers. Drones hit. Helicopters likely hit. Hundreds of American personnel and dozens of aircraft are stationed at that facility as a forward operating location for the campaign's strike sorties. Damaging those aircraft does not cripple the overall American campaign. The carrier strike groups operating in the Gulf provide an independent strike architecture that does not depend on the Jordanian base, but it represents the most significant single physical damage event to American military equipment and personnel in this conflict. And it comes at a moment when the operational tempo is being told to increase dramatically. The president's instruction to decision-makers to rain hell on Iran is not a rhetorical flourish. In the context of a military campaign that has already been described by CENTCOM as ascending, each operational window larger than the previous one, each strike package targeting a broader and more comprehensive set of Iranian military infrastructure, the presidential instruction to escalate further represents a political authorization for the military to remove whatever remaining constraints have been governing the selection of target categories and the scale of individual strike packages. The new wave of American strikes is expected to be far more expansive than the past ones. That statement comes from official reporting with White House sourcing, far more expansive than a campaign that has already struck more than 300 confirmed targets, destroyed 6 highway and railway bridges in a single night, bombed an Iranian airport specifically to deny Russian and Chinese resupply flights a safe runway, and hit a nuclear construction facility overnight. The ceiling that the campaign has not yet found is about to be tested at a higher altitude. CENTCOM's own announcement of its continued operations in this operational window confirms the expansion of the strike geography to encompass nearly every major Iranian province adjacent to the Strait of Hormuz and the Arabian Gulf simultaneously. Military coastal surveillance facilities, air defense infrastructure, maritime capabilities, missile and drone storage sites, cruise missiles visible in released footage, striking confirmed military targets, F-35s taking off in CENTCOM's released video, getting into the fight. The language from the official communications is consistent with every previous operational window, the same stated objective of degrading Iranian military capabilities, threatening commercial shipping. But the geographic scope described as the entire Iranian coastline being struck is the most expansive coverage of any single operational period since the conflict began. Now address the Supreme Leader question, because the Foreign Minister's statement is the most politically significant Iranian leadership disclosure since the current Supreme Leader took office in March. Abbas Araghchi, the most public-facing senior Iranian official, the chief negotiator, the foreign minister, said in an interview that he has not seen the Supreme Leader Mojtahid Moshe Mohammad during this period, and that he does not believe anyone other than a limited few has seen him. The foreign minister of the Islamic Republic has not met with the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic while the country is engaged in the most intensive military conflict of its post-revolutionary history. That is not a communication about scheduling. That is a communication about the actual state of governance inside Iran. A Supreme Leader who has been invisible to his own foreign minister for months during a period of maximum national crisis is either incapacitated, underground in a hardened facility that limits his access to the officials who theoretically report to him, or dead. None of those 3 possibilities is consistent with functional governance. And a country that is simultaneously absorbing the most devastating air campaign in its military history and conducting multi-front retaliatory operations across the Gulf region without confirmed functioning supreme leadership at the top of the command structure is a country whose decision-making architecture is operating on institutional momentum and factional authority rather than coherent strategic direction from a unified command. The implications of that command vacuum are significant and underappreciated. Every military organization depends on clear authority at the top of the chain to make the decisions that exceed the authorization of subordinate commanders. The decisions about when to escalate, when to accept an off-ramp, when to authorize the use of specific capabilities that are reserved for supreme command authorization, and when to seek a negotiated end to a conflict that is producing casualties and infrastructure losses at the rate this one is. If the supreme leader is not accessible to his own foreign minister, then the authorization for those decisions is either being made by someone below the supreme command level, the IRGC's senior commanders, the hardline clerical factions, the shadow generals in the Strait of Hormuz operational theater, or it is not being made at all, with the organization running on pre-existing authorizations and operational momentum without the command authority to change course, even if some faction within the Iranian government wanted to. The IRGC's continuation of attacks on commercial vessels, ballistic missile salvos against multiple Gulf nations simultaneously, and now strikes killing American soldiers in Jordan, all happening while the foreign minister has not met with the supreme leader, is the behavioral pattern of an organization that has lost the command coherence required to recalibrate its operational posture in response to a military situation that is deteriorating against it. Russia and China's role in this conflict now demands direct analytical confrontation rather than the careful diplomatic framing that has characterized most of the public discussion. Russia is running weapons into Iran on special flight squadron aircraft. Russia is likely providing satellite imagery and targeting intelligence that may be improving the accuracy of Iranian ballistic missiles against American military positions. Russia's Beidou equivalent, GLONASS, may be providing navigation support to Iranian missile guidance systems, in addition to the Chinese Beidou contribution already confirmed by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. China has geospatial intelligence firms with documented People's Liberation Army connections that have been marketing U.S. force position data to actors in this theater. China is running Mahan Air flights from Shanghai into Tehran with unknown cargo at irregular intervals, disappearing from commercial radar as they cross Iranian airspace, using transponder discipline that signals deliberate concealment of arrival timing and location to anyone monitoring the flight. Both countries are doing these things while officially maintaining that they are not parties to the conflict, and while using their permanent Security Council seats to constrain the international diplomatic response to a conflict in which they are providing material military support to one of the parties. That combination, active military support combined with diplomatic obstruction of accountability, is not neutrality. It is a form of warfare that maintains the technical deniability required to avoid direct confrontation with the United States, while achieving the strategic objective of bleeding American military resources and credibility in a regional proxy conflict. Crater the runways. That is the operational response that the intelligence picture demands, not as a rhetorical statement, but as a specific military objective. Every Iranian airport that continues to accept Russian Special Flight Squadron aircraft carrying weapons, air defense components, and technical advisors is providing logistical support to the forces that killed 2 Americans in Jordan. Every runway that remains intact and accessible to Chinese-registered Mahan Air cargo flights of unknown content is a supply pipeline that partially offsets the destruction of the rail bridge that was supposed to cut Chinese military resupply to Iran. The Semnan Airport strike in the previous operational window was the first application of this logic to a specific runway. The presidential instruction to rain hell on Iran provides the political authorization to extend that logic to every airport in Iran that is hosting resupply flights from Russia and China. And the specific connection between Russian and Chinese intelligence cooperation and the strike that killed American soldiers creates a public moral and political rationale for that expansion that no previous development in this conflict has provided as clearly. The 3 pressure tracks converging on the Islamic Republic have now reached a phase of simultaneous intensity that includes the first confirmed American battlefield deaths. And those deaths have produced a presidential response instruction that explicitly calls for a level of violence that exceeds everything the campaign has previously executed. The military track, already executing against the entire Iranian coastline simultaneously, is about to become far more expansive by presidential directive. The economic track, already severing supply chains and disrupting port and power infrastructure across the south, is now also being pressed by the Semnan Airport strikes specifically targeting the air bridge that Russia and China have been using to partially offset the destroyed land corridor. The psychological track, which had been operating primarily on Iranian domestic audiences and regional governments, now includes the death of 2 American soldiers and the Russian and Chinese intelligence cooperation claim, facts that transform the American domestic political environment in ways that remove whatever remaining constraints might have limited the campaign's escalation. The honest strategic assessment of where this conflict stands, following the Jordan strikes, the nuclear facility bombing, and the presidential instruction to rain hell is this: the conflict has crossed 2 thresholds in a single operational window that it had not previously crossed. The first is the confirmed death of American service members in direct strikes on American military positions. Not soldiers killed in other circumstances, but soldiers killed in their containerized housing units by Iranian ballistic missiles at a location that Iran has now struck 4 times in 5 days with increasing accuracy. The second is the confirmed or suspected nuclear construction facility strike, which expands the campaign's objective from maritime security and IRGC military degradation into the active elimination of Iran's nuclear program infrastructure, including the facilities that would reconstitute that program after the current campaign ends. Both thresholds matter independently. Together, they represent a conflict that has shifted from a campaign with bounded objectives into something whose terminal conditions are no longer clearly defined by the official operational framing. The supreme leader, whom no one has seen, the foreign minister who has not met with him, the shadow generals in the Strait running operations that the nominal command authority in Tehran may not have fully authorized. The Russian satellites helping Iranian missiles find American soldiers. The Chinese navigation system guiding Iranian warheads to their targets. The nuclear construction facility bombed overnight, while Iranian air defenses fire over Isfahan. The CRAM systems firing red streams into the night sky over Iraq. The missiles that got through to Jordan. The 2 empty bunks and containerized housing units at a base in Jordan. This is the picture as it stands. Not the version where overwhelming American military power has already produced the conditions for a negotiated settlement. Not the version where the IRGC is out of options and days from capitulation. The version where an adversary that has absorbed weeks of the most intensive American air campaign in the history of this bilateral conflict is still killing American soldiers with increasing accuracy, potentially because 2 of the most powerful countries on Earth are helping it aim, while the president has instructed the military to escalate in a way that will exceed everything it has already done, and where the entity notionally in command of the adversary has not been seen by his own foreign minister since the conflict began. That combination does not describe a conflict approaching its conclusion. It describes a conflict entering its most dangerous and most consequential phase, and the 2 soldiers killed in Jordan are the grim, undeniable evidence that what comes next will not look like what came before. The gates of hell are open. The rain is coming. And somewhere in a hardened facility deep underground, the man who is supposed to be directing the Islamic Republic's response to all of this may or may not still be alive to receive the report of what American aircraft are about to deliver. That unresolved question is itself the most destabilizing fact in a situation full of them. Because a war that is being fought against a command structure whose supreme authority cannot be confirmed as living or dead is a war whose ending cannot be negotiated with the authority that would need to be at the table to make any agreement binding. And an adversary that cannot negotiate because its supreme command authority is invisible is an adversary that can only be stopped by a military campaign that makes stopping the only option left for the people who are actually running things. Whether that point has been reached, or whether it requires everything the presidential instruction to rain hell is about to authorize, is the question that the next operational window will begin to answer.